Good evening, welcome to Africa at a Crossroads, and I'm Lisa Tomizuka. Rising taxes and living costs continue to pressure households amid growing public debt. Analysts call for transparency and stronger democratic institutions across the continent. Drought and environmental stress continue to threaten vulnerable communities. Experts warn that over-reliance on foreign aid and loans may weaken policy autonomy. Across Africa, nations continue to face growing economic pressure, governance concerns, climate-related challenges, and shifting global alliances. Tonight, we examine how these issues are shaping the lives of ordinary citizens and influencing the future of the continent. This is Africa at a Crossroads. You can now join the conversation on our social media handles at Africa_Crossroads on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Kenya's rising debt burden continues to spark debate among economists, policymakers, and ordinary citizens. Many households say that the effects are already being felt through high taxes, increased living costs, and unemployment. Our correspondent Nancy Kingori now reports.
Kenya's growing debt burden continues to raise concerns as citizens struggle with rising living costs, unemployment, and higher taxes.
I do not believe that the debt situation is affecting me directly at the moment, but I do believe if we continue going at the pace that we are going, it will affect each and every Kenyan in the long run.
The government says borrowing is necessary for development. Critics warn that increasing debt repayments may place long-term pressure on the economy and future generations. This is Nancy reporting for Africa at a Crossroads.
We also had an opportunity to interact with one of our correspondents on the ground. Richie, how is Kenya's rising debt affecting the economy and ordinary citizens?
Loans that will be maturing within the next 12 months were borrowed externally from various lenders. She noted that the country is already struggling to meet its debt obligations, especially for the money that was borrowed through treasury bonds. According to the report, the government had delayed in the repayments of approximately 53 billion shillings for money that was borrowed through treasury bonds, with the delays being between 1 and 2 months. Therefore, the COB has warned that unless the country takes fiscal consolidation measures, such as reducing the budget deficit and cutting spending, the country will default. Public debt had risen to 12.3 trillion by the end of December 2025. Notably, the outstanding debt portfolio continues to rise given the weakening of the shilling that has been occasioned by the conflict in the Middle East.
To help us understand this issue further, we are now joined by economist Ibrahim. What are the key structural factors driving economic fragility and rising debt specifically, and how do they interact with global economic pressures?
So, the word first, if we compare so how it played out in Kenya's economy.
In your view, what policy measures should Kenya prioritize to manage its debt sustainability while still supporting economic growth and protecting vulnerable populations?
So there's an interesting challenge faced with Kenya's debt situation, and I'd say generally the budget financing situation, which is that, there's this idea that in order for Kenya to develop, we need to borrow. We just need to spend on infrastructure, right? We just need to confine ourselves essentially to just building highways, building stadia among other things, in order for us to develop. And part of the challenge there is that there are certain sectors that, yes, infrastructure is important, but other methods of service delivery are also important. So you take the health sector. It's important that you build a hospital. So you can take a loan, for example, to build a hospital. But in order for that hospital to actually mean anything to the residents in that area, it needs to be equipped. It needs to be staffed. It needs to have medicine, right? And those are typically not things that we borrow for, right? Those things come out of tax revenue, right? So the money that we collect in taxes. But perhaps that might require a shift, right? So as Vision 2030 now comes to an end in 4 years, how is it that, or one of the policy measures that we could actually look into is, how is it that we can differently define development differently to factor in these different sectors that don't necessarily need as much infrastructure, right? So, there are certain counties where there are more hospitals than other counties combined, or more ambulances than other counties combined, but, service delivery in those counties is actually not significantly better in health, So that's definitely one. Another one is focusing on, and this is something that's been, the mind of Kenyans recently, is focusing on the things that actually government needs to spend on and the things that government doesn't need to spend on.
On to the next story. Across parts of Africa, governance concerns and disputed elections continue to challenge public trust in democratic institutions. Political analysts argue that electoral disputes and allegations of malpractice can weaken public confidence and create political instability. Our very own Jesse Kihumba has more on this story.
Across Africa, concerns over governance and electoral malpractice continue to shape public trust in leadership and democratic institutions. Allegations of corruption, voter manipulation, and lack of transparency have left many citizens questioning the credibility of electoral processes.
I'm hoping so, because people are coming together, so I'm hoping they'll be fair.
Reporting for Africa to Crossroads, this is Jesse Kihumba.
We are now joined by voter registration clerk Matthew Ruto. How can leaders rebuild public confidence after cases of electoral malpractice?
Okay, leaders can build back the confidence of the public through acknowledgement of the malpractice and also reforms of such the institutions which govern the elections, and also ensuring there is accountability of all the funds, all the resources allocated to the different constituencies, wards, or dockets which the leaders hold, that everything can be traced back and they are utilizing it for the betterment of the country or the citizens.
Do you think weak governance contributes to repeated election irregularities, and why? Thank you, Matthew Ruto. Now, climate change continues to affect communities across Africa, with prolonged droughts and unpredictable weather patterns placing pressure on natural resources. Environmental experts warn that climate shocks are contributing to food insecurity, displacement, and increased competition over water and grazing land. We have Wangu with this story.
Climate change continues to affect millions across Africa through droughts, floods, and unpredictable weather patterns. As resources such as food, land, and water become more limited, competition and economic pressure continue to grow within vulnerable communities.
Definitely climate has affected that, and it depends on the situation, though. It could be in a good way or a bad way. Stuff like drought, famine has definitely affected access to food and water, and the cost of living, most certainly.
Oh, baby.
Wango for Africa at a Crossroads.
Thank you so much, Wangu. Joining us now is Junior Manager at Gatsby Africa, Jason Oyugi. How do climate shocks intensify competition over natural resources in vulnerable regions?
Yeah, to that question, again, there are quite a lot of examples that we can draw from and see how climate change is intensifying competition. I mean, one off the top of my head would be what's happening in Laikipia and Baringo. I mean, you're seeing a lot of pastoralists migrating and encroaching on land that's for ranches, right? And out of this, I think since 2020, over 90 people have died and have been active, like shot, because they have encroached in farmland, and they have encroached in land that that's not theirs, just looking for pasture for their cattle. So it's going to get worse if it's not solved for, and it's really going to intensify over the coming years, especially here in Kenya, where I mean less than 20% of our land is arable. Like, what does that mean? We are competing for resources. We're competing for the little land that we can plant agricultural crops, and population is growing. Food demand is increasing, and it doesn't look like we have a very clear path to address that. So, yeah.
In what ways does resource scarcity caused by climate change contribute to conflict between communities?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Lisa. Unfortunately, there are very many examples in which climate shocks are negatively affecting vulnerable regions. We're seeing a lot of droughts in recent past. We're seeing a lot of fires. We're seeing a lot of stress on water and soil. This is actively affecting people. I mean, I think the other year we received a statistic that over 4 million Kenyans are in crisis level hunger due to climate change. And if you look at the wider Horn of Africa, I mean, that number goes up to 20 million. So it's pretty bad when you consider that most of Kenyans are farmers and subsistence farmers, and so when you get shocks from drought, when you get fires, I mean, these are people that will starve, that will go hungry because of climate change. So I think there are very many examples to draw from, and it's pretty sad.
On to the last story. African countries continue to navigate growing reliance on foreign aid, loans, and international partnerships. Policy experts argue that weakened multilateral cooperation and increased external dependency could limit Africa's ability to independently shape policy decisions. Ruguru Tanya has the story.
Archives was established back in 1965, and it's an institution that aims to preserve the country's history and cultural heritage.
Believe that multilateralism has greater safeguards and provides an even environment for trade for nations across the world. Because as things stand today, globalization of trade is not an option. It is an existential imperative. I do not think any one company anywhere in the world can survive on its own.
Yeah, that is kind of the trend. I feel like there are many systems entrenched since even before, maybe like 2-3 governments ago, that has caused us to be overly reliant on aid. That may include from private sectors to even public. And I feel like it's really gotten to the point where it's part of our daily governance, I would say, that aid is just a part of even the economy itself. So yeah, it's something that really has dug its roots in deep, and for it to not be the case, it would need to be, well, basically that we have our own independent, bigger industries that can, prop up the economy rather than that. Yeah, I'd say that.
I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces. The Assembly.
Thank you so much for that, Rogoro. We are now joined by IR analyst Tracy Viona. How can countries reduce external dependency while still benefiting from global partnerships?
Countries can reduce dependency by strengthening local production, investing in skills, technology, and domestic industries so that they rely less on imports and external fundings for basic needs. At the same time, they can still benefit from global partnerships by shifting from aid-based relationships to equal trade, investment, and knowledge sharing agreements. The key is diversification, working with multiple partners, not relying on one donor or lender, and ensuring agreements build local capacity rather than long-term dependence.
What impact does weakened multilateralism have on corporations in addressing global challenges?
When multilateralism weakens, institutions like the United Nations, WHO, World Bank, and International Monetary Fund becomes less effective in coordinating global responses. We see that this leads to slower actions on issues like pandemic, climate change, and security threats because countries start prioritizing national interests over collective solutions.
As Africa continues to confront economic, political, and environmental challenges, experts emphasize the need for stronger institutions, sustainable policies, and accountable leadership. Thank you for watching Africa at Crossroads. I'm Lisa Tomizuka. Have a good night.
For today's video, we'll be exploring Nairobi's bustling central business district, where the pulse